Sam, it's great to have you here. When we get pets, we always think we need to train the pet. Got to make sure we train the pet. Do maybe the trainers of the pets sometimes need a little more training than what we're willing to believe we need?
Yeah, of course. So whenever I go into clients' houses, I always recommend that they have to train themselves first. It's really important to have a great foundation of dog training because if you don't know what you're doing, your dog is not going to understand what you're trying to train them. So I always start by training the owner so that they know what to do, so that they can help their dog and set their dog up for success. Really, when we're dog training, we want to make sure that we're putting our dog in a situation where they can be successful. If we just make it really, really hard and they don't understand what we're asking them to do, they're not going to do anything. And sometimes that's when you actually start getting bad behaviors, is because the dog is like, what do you want me to do? And they just sit there and go, maybe I'll try go in the trash. Maybe I'll try pull on the leash a little bit harder. And what they're really doing is trying to figure out what you want from them. So it's really important that we have a good foundation so that we know how to tell our dogs what we want them to do. And normally we use reinforcement to train them these new behaviors. One of the best advice I can give is dogs learn from what to do, not what not to do. Perfect example of this is, let's say you were at a party and there was a platter of food and you went to go touch the food and somebody said, no, no, you can't have that food. And you're really hungry, you really want that food. What you're gonna do is you're gonna say, oh, okay, and then start looking for food elsewhere. If you can't find it, you're gonna go back and maybe try to sneak some of that food off that platter. You might try and like see if somebody else will give you food. But if the person were to say, hey, you can't have food from this platter here, but over there, there's a platter of food that you can have, then you'll go directly there and start getting that food from that platter, right? And so that's really what we want to teach our dogs is, hey, you can't do this, but look at you can do this other thing and this is appropriate.
This is so great. Training the owner. So don't teach a pet what not to do, teach them what to do. That's what dogs
Yeah,
are looking to do. They're very obedient creatures. They want to be doing right, right? They want that reinforcement.
exactly. And a lot of dogs like to please their owners too. Um, the one thing that I notice is that a lot of people just automatically think like, oh, you know what, I've helped my dog in whatever way, like I've rescued my dog, so my dog owes me their obedience. But really, what we need to think about is your dog is not going to just inherently listen to you because you saved them. A lot of the time, it's a lot more complex than that. Dogs do what is reinforcing. So if something is paying off for them, they're going to continue to do that behavior. If something's not paying off, they're just going to be like, I don't need to do that and move along. You wouldn't go to work for your boss for free for like 3 weeks, and then he's just like, "Ah, here's a banana. Thank you." You'd be like, "Oh, okay, thank you for this banana, but I just like put in hours of work and I got nothing." Your dog is thinking the same thing. If you make them work for a really long time, um, and you give them a banana, they're gonna be like, eh, okay, that really wasn't worth my while, right? And so we really need to make sure that when we are training, that we're reinforcing our dog with something that is actually valuable to them. Um, Valuable can mean a lot of different things. Um, Normally, we like to look at what the dog wants the most in each situation. So, for example, if your dog is jumping on a guest when they come in, we like to look at the ABCs of behavior. So, A is the antecedent, B is the behavior, and C is the consequences. Um, Jumping on the guest is the behavior. So, we focus on that, and then we say, okay, what happens before? So, A, we're looking at A, the guest comes in the house. So, that's what would happen before. Then we look at B, the dog jumps on the guest. So, that's the actual behavior. And then we look at C, which is the consequence. Normally people go, oh, cute dog, and start petting the dog and loving the dog. And the dog's like, oh, yay, I love this. This is great. And so that is technically the consequence for jumping up, right? And in that situation, what our dog wants the most is that guest's attention. And so when they're getting it from the guest, Well, that's reinforcing the jumping, and so the jumping is not going to stop unless if the guest learns to not touch the dog when the dog is jumping. But it gets really complex because sometimes dogs don't want the attention. So we have to really look at why. Why is your dog doing each behavior? So, for example, jumping, if we have a dog that's jumping on a guest, sometimes it's not because they want the attention from the guest. Sometimes it's because they don't want the guest to be there. They're jumping out of fear and they're actually trying to kind of get the guest to go away. Sometimes it's because dogs don't like their head being touched and they jump because that's what makes the person not touch the top of their head, right? And so when we do training plans, we have to really look at why is the dog doing each behavior. And once we can pinpoint why, we can start fixing the issue.
This is genius. This is great stuff. Sam, one last thing. When we're talking about changing that behavior, let's take the dog jumping up as the guest comes in. Is it something that you want to have the dog doing before the guest comes in to prevent that behavior? Or is there a way to correct the behavior as that's happening?
So there is a way to like correct behavior, but I tend to stay away from that. I like to say we want to be proactive instead of being reactive. So we want to think about what's going to happen in the near future and kind of try to predict what's going to happen so that we can set up the environment so that our dog is successful. This goes back to what I was saying before about we always want to set our dogs up for success. And so if you just let the guest come in the house and let your dog have free reign and jump all over the guest, um, you're going to have to correct that behavior, right? And your dog is not learning what to do. In that case, they're learning what not to do, right? And so we really want to show our dog what to do. So what I normally recommend doing is training your dog to do some sort of behavior that you would like your dog to do before that guest comes in. So for example, we can train sit. um, and you can get your dog to sit and you can put your dog on a leash just to make sure that if they go to jump, that they're not actually getting that reinforcement from the guest. Um, just because sometimes reinforcement is actually just like internal. So the dog actually gets joy just from touching or jumping on the guest. So even if your guest is standing there doing absolutely nothing, the dog is jumping and touching the guest and going, "Oh, contact. This is fun." And so now we've just reinforced that behavior again, right? And so as you can see, there are multiple factors that are reinforcing jumping, right? And so what we want to do is when we set our dogs up for success, we want to make sure that we manipulate like the environment just so that our dog is more likely to be successful. So having them on a leash will prevent them from actually touching the guest in any sort of way. You can also use gates or anything like that. Um, and then what you want to do is you want to tell the dog specifically what you want them to do. So when they're on a leash, if the guest comes in, you're going to ask them to sit. Um, and then when they sit, then the guest can give the attention to the dog if that's what the dog really wants. So if the dog wants the attention, then that's what you're going to use as the reinforcement. If the dog is terrified of the guest and is jumping to get the guest to go away, obviously we're not going to say, okay, my dog listened to me, now go and touch my dog, because your dog's going to be like, I did what you said and now you're bringing this fearful thing near me and oh my god, this is so scary. Right? And so really what we want is we want your dog to like actually enjoy that reinforcer. um and so yeah, um
That's
that's
perfect. Well,
it.
that's great advice. Sam, thank you for all of the advice today.
Yeah, no problem.